My name is Tony Giordano. Welcome to The Art of Men Acting. I hope in a few minutes I might be able to help you understand why I would call this video The Art of Men Acting, but it's something that I came to a long time ago and it means a great deal to me. I hope it will wind up meaning the same to you. I'm a theater director. I've spent my entire adult life traveling all over the United States and some Canada, some TV and some radio, but mostly theater. I've worked in the best theaters that we have in the country, and I've certainly worked with the greatest talents. People should only know how great the actors are who work on the stage. I'm not talking about film directors. We all know who they are. They're the stars. But I'm really talking about the down and dirty, earthbound actors who can put on a show 8 times a week and wow an audience in almost every style. And I have worked in just about every style with them. However, during those years, I was traveling so much around the country and living for 6 weeks here, 6 weeks there, working in different communities, learning a great deal about our country, in addition to my own career as a director. And I came to the awful conclusion that we were in trouble. Now, I guess that sounds pretty stupid because now in 2016, there are not too many people who don't know that we're in trouble, but I felt it 25 years ago. And I kept wondering what I could do about it, and eventually I decided the best thing maybe I could do is write and try to help people understand that though I came from an unsophisticated background, my father was in sanitation, my mother was a seamstress, we lived in an apartment in Brooklyn, it was my mother, my father, my sister, and myself. Nevertheless, I have had a great life. So the question is, how the hell did I do that? So I began to think maybe if I could share how I did it, other people can know it's possible. But I want you to know that though I've written 3 books, I don't believe you should buy any of my books or read them if you think that they're going to help you directly in any way. First of all, I wouldn't want to do that. I don't believe in that kind of help. I don't believe I have anything that can help, especially since I don't even know who you are. You're looking at me, but I'm not seeing anything. So I don't believe that there is anything I could say that makes you think you should live the way I lived. But I do believe, judging from the people who have bought the books and reading the comments that they leave on Amazon.com, I do believe it's possible that you could benefit a great deal from these books if you would read them not for any specific reason, but to find out how I went about having such a good life, coming from such, I guess, a poor background, although no one ever told us we were poor. Italians always have food in the refrigerator and meals on the table every single night. My mother worked, my father worked, my sister went to school, and so did I. But for some strange reason, dinner was wonderful all the time. How the Italian women do that, I'll never know, but I guess they come from 3,000 years of tradition. So I wrote my first book called Brooklyn Odyssey. Brooklyn Odyssey was the first book in which I try to tell the story of what it was like to grow up in an Italian-American family that was non-mafia. 99% of us in this country know nothing about the mafia. Nothing. Until I saw The Godfather, I really had no idea what it was. When I was growing up at a certain point, because everybody in my father's family was called Anthony, I told my mother, if you want to talk to me anymore, you have to call me Tony. She said, till the day I die, you will never hear that word come out of my mouth. I said, why? She said, because that's the mafia. I said, well, what does that have to do with me? She said, if I wanted to call you that, I would have called you that. I will never, ever, 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 ever speak that word. And I must tell you, she died 60 years later, and trust me, my mother was good to her word, never once called me Tony. If friends, when I was growing up, called the phone and said, Mrs. G, is Tony home? My mother would hand me the phone and say, Anthony. And so she was a wonderful mother. I had a great mother, a great father. I had a sister whose worst day of her life was the day I was born. But that's only because when Italians bring home the boy, you know that he is the prince. You just know it. And of course, in addition to that, I was a brat to begin with from as early an age as I could. So I wrote Brooklyn Odyssey to show that it's important to be a brat. It's your life. It's very important. It's your life. You're going to live it. And I think the very first thing that anybody has to do is confront that issue. My good friend Armand DeSante was one of the first people to really get this story, and so I asked him to write something for the back cover. And Armand writes that Brooklyn Odyssey must be made into a film. It is written in the spirit we all shared when we began our careers, but the rest of us forgot how to do it. Brooklyn Odyssey by legendary American theater director Tony Giordano is a rite of passage story concentrating on a young man's development amidst a wonderfully eccentric, funny, and tender family in the 50s. They're hardworking, honest Italian Americans. This story is a beautifully rendered moral tale demonstrating how families and teachers shape our destiny. What is most exciting about what Armand did is when he said a rite of passage, he actually spelled it correctly. He said R-I-G-H-T. Now, the reason that to me means a great deal is because of the rest of the rites of passage that we go through in life are R-I-T-E, and most people say that that's what a rite of passage is and that there is no other. But in my opinion, the rites of passage are contracts. They're agreements between you and a boss or a group of people who elect you for something that can be taken away from you if you fail. You can be fired, for one thing. A rite of passage is given to you by God. There is no way that you can ever have that taken away from you. It is simply the wonderful thing that comes with your birth. And if you're wise, you will take the journey to fulfill it. If you do take the journey to fulfill it, you will then get foundation under you before you move into all the rites of passage. So I thought it was a good idea if I took book one and created the entire book about how I went about fulfilling my personal rite of passage. Okay, and so it's an epic of life surrounding America in Brooklyn, surrounding World War II. My father went into World War II, even though, because he had 2 children, there was no reason for him to do that. Except, and he told me this right before he died, late in life, he was guilty for the fact that everybody else was fighting for the country, and he just couldn't bear that. So he went to the recruiting office and convinced them to find a way to make it look like he was drafted. My mother never knew this. Good thing, too, because had she probably would have killed him. She was so angry when we had to move out of our apartment and move back in with her parents and 4 sisters over a dry goods store in Brooklyn, the greatest period of my life. Well, one of them. I've had so many of them. But I was spoiled rotten in that apartment. You can't imagine, with the grandparents that I had and the aunts I had and my mother's nervous condition that my father would never return, I was able to take advantage of all of them. My sister used to sneak around the corner just to see what more trouble I was causing everybody in order to get whatever the hell I needed and wanted. But believe me, there was nothing but love surrounding those 2 years. When my father returned, we moved to the other side of Brooklyn, to the Fort Greene projects, because obviously we had no money. And so for the next 4 years, from 7 to 11, I really experienced life. I think I know more, and I knew more at 11 than I believe most adults know now. Those were 4 of my favorite years in many ways. My closest friend was Carl Cruikshank. I look for him constantly now on the internet, but, we parted at 11. We didn't mail, there were no real telephones, there was no way to continue a friendship, except I never forgot him, and I promise you, he never forgot me. Carl was 2 years older than me and chunky, and I was as thin as the pinky finger. And his mother used to really love the fact that I was Carl's friend because she felt I could protect him. Carl would laugh as we left his apartment and say, my mother has this belief that you could take care of me. You can't even beat your sister. And that, of course, was true. I could never beat my sister up. My sister could beat up just about everybody in the neighborhood. I could make them think I could do it because I could outtalk them. in many ways. So my rite of passage is definitely in Brooklyn Odyssey. It takes a long time before the book becomes about me, because for the first half of it, it's the family, it's the war, it's the period of Brooklyn that I'm really kind of interested in. And of course, the kid starts at 6 years old. So it's not till he is, maybe 10 or 11, and we go through those years with him before he finally connects to how he's going to go about his life. He's made a decision that somewhere along the line he's going to do something differently than what they've all done. He's not going to follow in their footsteps. He loves them. He loves them. And the hardest thing about writing Brooklyn Odyssey is there's no villain. I mean, really, you might say my sister perhaps, but my sister was a great gal. She was not easy, but she was a tremendous person. The family were phenomenal. But I really didn't want to be with them. And so when I got out into the world and I saw how much trouble the world was in, and I began to say, well, wait a minute, hold a second. I had a great start. Maybe I can show people how important that great start is. So in time, I then jump into my second book, which is Tonight I Won't Be Acting. Both books, how do I do this? Both books are subtitled The Art of Men Acting. So is my third book, Not for Profit, The Art of Men Acting. In Tonight I Won't Be Acting, I don't talk about how I directed any show. I was a professional director. I was viewed fully by the best critics in America. Everywhere I went, there were 20, 30 reviews for each show that would go on and on and on for days or a couple of weeks. And the most I did at the end of book 2 is that I put in my curriculum vitae so one could see that I had had that kind of a career. It was a blessed career at best. And that I have a few pages of condensed quotes from the critics. But in the stories themselves, they're anecdotes. Now, the reason that The Art of Men Acting exists in all 3 books is because I never stop reminding people who read book 2 and book 3 what happened to members of my family from book 1. And also in book 2, I'm trying very hard to show that the theater artists are no different than our friends and our family. People are people. I don't say we have the same equal talent, but an actress who can't get out of the dressing room on opening night because she's scared to death is not dissimilar than an Aunt Josie who went and hid in the closet every time there was thunder and lightning. People who are frightened are frightened. And so I try to show the humanity within that aspect of the art of men acting. Henry Herx, a tremendous critic from a magazine in Washington, D.C., a film magazine, wrote a statement at the end of this cover, which I will read to you. It's brief. And Henry's no longer with us. He's up there with the celestial players. They're all waiting for me. I will get there sooner than they think, I think. Without this book, who could ever know that anyone was living such a wonderful life as a theater director throughout the United States? Tonight I Won't Be Acting will inspire anyone who wants a career in theater to see that it is possible. And for all others, Tonight I Won't Be Acting is a fabulous read filled with anecdotes of stars. And I would say that judging from the way people read the books, mostly they're entertaining. Apparently they read, many people say to me they're a page turner. I start and I can't stop. Some people told me that they read it all in one day. One guy read all 3 books in 1 week, and I met him at a party, and when he began telling me about my books, I was staring at him. He said, am I hurting you in any way? And I said, no, I'm stunned. You're really a good reader. By having read the 3 of them together, you not only got each individual book and each individual style, because I've written in 3 totally different styles, but you've gotten what coordinates them, what the link is. I said, that is something I doubt too many people will ever do, but you did it. I'd like to just jump to a little quote at the end of my 3rd book. This is Tonight I Won't Be Acting. Not for Profit. I don't even know the name of my books. Where are you? Not for Profit, also called The Art of Men Acting. In Not for Profit, I quote Edwin Markham's poem, The Man with the Hoe, because I want to talk about getting into the art of men acting. In The Man with the Hoe, I'm only going to read you the first stanza. He has 6 stanzas. I'm obviously not going to do that. But he says, bowed by the weight of centuries, he leans upon his hoe and gazes on the ground, the emptiness of ages in his face, and on his back the burden of the world. Who made him dead to rapture and despair, a thing that grieves and that never hopes, stolid and stunned, a brother to the ox? Who loosened and let down this brutal jaw? Whose was the hand that slanted back this brow? Whose breath blew out the light within this brain? Now, Edwin Markham was talking about what happened to the worker because of the Industrial Revolution. And so he refers to the fact that the farmer is standing with his hoe, tilling the soil and working it, has not a thought in his head, has no feelings, is not able to make any decisions, not capable of any choice. He has, in a sense, in order to farm and produce product for masses of people, he has given himself up. He has lost everything. I do not recommend that. I believe, and the same thing I feel about my books, I don't want anybody to think that you could read my books and get some help. Because if you want to lose weight, I certainly don't know anything about that. And if you want anything else specific, I don't think anything about my life would be specific to your life. If you want to learn how to cook lasagna, well, my mother is gone, it's too late. So the only thing I want you to do when you read the books is to begin to compare. Begin to think to yourself, well, I see what he did, but he was definitely a spoiled brat. And somehow he managed to get through whatever the troubles were. But remember, some of you probably had more money. Maybe you had books in the house. I don't know that we ever had a book in my house. Nobody ever talked about theater. The very fact that I wound up going to the theater and winding up having such a great life in the theater was due to the 2 people who I dedicate Tonight I Won't Be Acting to. Daniel Berrigan, my Latin and English teacher at Brooklyn Prep, a tremendous school in Brooklyn run by the Jesuits. And Daniel then, when I graduated, sent me to Fairfield University to John Lewis Bond, another Jesuit who was a star beyond a star. And so, as far as I'm concerned, these 2 men managed to create a bridge for me into a world I had never even heard of. The next thing I knew, I had a great life. So if we seek, we shall find, I guess. If we listen to others, we can then interpret for ourselves. If we want to parallel, more often than not, we will come up with some answer. The art of men acting, then, is what I noticed when I traveled around the country. And I multiplied it by what I've read and heard about in the whole world, although I have seen a bit of the world also, that 98% of the world's population is taking orders from 2% of the people. And of the 2% of the people who are giving the orders, telling us how to feel, what to think, what to buy, where to go, whatever, half of them probably are corrupt. The other half, and I might even be perhaps in one of those 2%, it's possible, I'm not really sure where I fit in, but the other half are sincere. They mean well. The problem is that they have failed to understand when they tell people, I can help you, I can do things for you, so elect me, vote for me. They're forgetting that nobody can do that. The moment anybody says to me that I can be the President of the United States and give 340 people what they need, I would never vote for that person. I want to vote for the person who says, I will be the president, I will do the 4 or 5 jobs that go with presidency, I will do nothing else for you. I will give you the opportunity to figure it all out for yourself. Because until we figure it out for ourselves, we have nothing. So in book 2, Tonight I Won't Be Acting, well, book 1, to get back to that for a second, I would say that I show people clearly how I created the ownership to my life, how I fulfilled my destiny, my odyssey, how I was ready to proceed then into the rites of passage that might occur. And 15 years later, after I finished a certain kind of education, I enter the theater, and I begin this book on really, in a sense, the first day of when I entered the theater. And I show, with one anecdote after another, the simplicity of that journey and how I was able to deal with the challenges that confronted me. Some of them were obstacles that were very serious. Some of them were um, charming, funny, silly, farcical things. But how I was able, in fact, to overcome whatever the problems were and get through an interesting career as a freelance theater director. Much of it you will laugh about because some of it is very, very funny. So I'm showing, therefore, how getting the first rite of passage gave me a foundation to be able to do the rest. In book 3, tonight I won't be up. Sorry, one of these days I'll figure out what I wrote. In book 3, Not for Profit, I would say it's the book that comes closest to who I am now. Because this is the book that tells everybody what I feel about the world as it exists at this moment, and how angry I have been at all of the corruption that I witnessed. Because half of me was in the commercial theater in New York and television and whatever, the rest of it was in the not-for-profit theater. And I found in the not-for-profit theater that the taxpayers were asked to put up with an enormous amount of money, and I don't believe they ever got their money's worth. And I believe that so many people in the not-for-profit theater are misusing it simply because they can't get careers in the commercial theater. So for me, this is money from the not-for-profit, Profit, that allowed us no prophetic enlightenment. We never got from the not-for-profit our just due for all the money that was created. And it began with the beginning of my career. It began in 1964. After Kennedy died, who started this, and by the way, his close friend Robert Frost, our great poet, begged him not to create the National Endowment of the Arts. It was a very simple theory. He said art must pass through the marketplace in order for it to become art. If you create a bureaucracy in the government, then it will be superimposed, not because the people want it or are creating it, but because you want to give it to them as a service. It will not be art. Well, nobody listened to him. In any case, I graduated from Catholic University in '62 with my master's in drama. I spent a year on the road as an actor playing Rodrigo in Othello all over the United States and Europe. I came back and began my career in '64 when Johnson fulfilled the National Endowment of the Arts. And in that period of time, I was, like everybody else, thrilled. I was assuming that everything was well taken care of. There was no problem. The only problem was I was one of the 98% of the world's population who really didn't investigate anything. Fortunately, because of the kind of career I've had, and because I was in the middle of everything, I was at the Playwrights Conference in Eugene O'Neill in Waterford, Connecticut for 11 years. I was executive vice president of the Directors Union in New York City for 8, 9, or 10 years. I was one of the founders of Manhattan Plaza Performing Arts Housing. I was directing shows at Yale and all the regional theaters, and I was teaching directing at Yale for a short time. I really was in the middle. I would say there was very little in theater that happened anywhere between Oregon and Florida, San Diego and Maine, stopping most of the time through New York, that I didn't know what was happening. And all I could tell you is that I saw people all over the country really suffering. They weren't talking to each other. They weren't thinking. They weren't feeling anything. They weren't participating. They were very similar to the man with the hoe, except in Markham's poem, he blames the Industrial Revolution. I don't blame the Industrial Revolution because it's too late for that. I blame us, the 98% of the people. We have free education. We have television, 500 channels, 24/7. We have all kinds of cable. We have all kinds of Hollywood. We have public education. We have everything. We have everything that we could use if we really wanted to learn to think and feel, but we somehow don't do that. We're still being told and forced into cliches. And the reason why I think that you have to overcome that is because if you sit back and let those of us who are in leadership do everything for you, it will fail. The reason America is possibly on its way out is simply because no way can it work unless everybody, this is a great, great country that gave to everybody who lives here a chance to vote, a chance to be whoever the hell we want to be. But unless you take that chance in very seriously and do something with it, you will fail. I'm one of the founders of Manhattan Plaza, as I mentioned, and let me just simply say that in 1975, I was one of 10 people who went to a meeting, and then we were asked to help save the owners who were putting up buildings that nobody was going to live in that neighborhood. It was too rough. Could we get the government to put up a subsidy for performing artists? And would performing artists be willing to at least live there? Because wherever they normally live, they usually improve a neighborhood. So we did it. It took about 17, 18 months for all the paperwork to be done. And when it was done, we made a partnership, in a sense, between the unions and the government for a subsidy. That subsidy involved taxpayers coming up with a great deal of money. The paperwork that was agreed upon, however, was very precise as to who could live there and who couldn't. The moment it was achieved, which was March 1977, within 2 months, June 1977, two people, one from the New York City Housing Preservation and Development, who was supposed to be monitoring this, and the other was a manager of the owner of the building, got together secretly and stole 169 of those apartments, came to us and told us the government sent them to make this correction, that there was never meant to be 100% of the apartments were never meant to be subsidized, only 90%. So they took 169 apartments out of the 1690 apartments in the building, and we were horrified, but we believed them. When I watched them lie for the next 9 years, because I was always on the committee, and my other friend did the same thing, we looked at each other and said, you know what? They don't ever tell the truth. Did we ever see paperwork when they told us the government sent them? And when we checked, there was no paperwork. Eventually, they gave us a 4x8 piece of paper that simply said memo to the files, in which the two of them in her office one day decided to extract 169 apartments. And of course, at that point, she and her husband were living in the building, when in fact it was for performing artists. Well, the point I'm trying to make is that over the years, this corruption never stopped, because little by little they began to alter what those apartments were and how they were trying to get away with it or not. And unfortunately, I'm like the hound of heaven. I have watched every step along the way. And about 2 years ago, thinking that now it was 35 years later they could get away with it, they announced the fact that even though we had been told originally there were no 169 apartments, they were never meant to be subsidized, they announced the fact to a related company, which is our landlords now, that they could use them in another apartment, another building, because they had an extra 169 apartments. So all the performing artists who were paid for to live in those apartments by the taxpayers and had been cheated were out in the cold. Now, my point is, the art of men acting is to get everybody thinking, talking. Stop sitting on your hands. Our IRS is a mess. Our education system is a mess. Our penal system is a mess. I doubt that there's anybody in America who doesn't have someone in your family or in your neighborhood who isn't in jail or is about to go to jail for, usually, I don't want to say totally crimeless. And nothing is crimeless if you keep making a law about the crime of everything. But half of them are in jail because they are taking pills, which I'm not in favor of, but they're taking pills that their parents get prescriptions for. So when they're going to buy a stupid pill in a drugstore, more often than not, it's an undercover agent. Everybody's playing cops and robbers. So between cops and robbers and soap opera and cowboys and Indians and soldiers and enemies, we're literally a grown-up group of infants. And it's time, honestly, for you to talk to each other. You're not going to be told how to do it. Nobody's going to help you. Nobody wants you to do that. The same as the farmer who wanted the man with the hoe not to learn to think. Our society feels the same way. Only they give you so much activity in order to prevent you from ever thinking clearly for yourself. So I beg you, talk to the neighbor, talk to the person next to you when you're sitting in the doctor's office, talk on a bus. Find out what they think. And if they don't want to talk to you, of course, be polite. But try to share with them how you feel about this, that, or the other thing. Let people disagree with you. Learn from their disagreement. It's urgent, really, that we start taking an active role, because otherwise, I'm telling you, you're being cheated. The Manhattan Plaza situation I just described to you is now about 40 years in its existence, and they're trying to prove around the country that more of these should be created. Well, I don't know how much has been spent, but I think the taxpayers have spent approximately $30 million a year for 40 years in order for us to do this. And when 7 years ago we created, two of us, a survey to see if the building was willing to go into a condo, non-eviction correction, which I call the win-win situation. Nobody would be excluded, and people could take over the building from the taxpayers, and anybody who wanted to stay on the subsidy could. Instead of that, the former owners sold the building overnight to the present owners and managed to get from the taxpayers twice as much money per apartment as had been given before. So nobody went back to the taxpayers. Nobody asked. Nobody said, do you want to continue this? Nobody said, hey, look at how much this has been, and is this fair? Should a man who works in a mine on Friday night have to put up 50 cents towards this $30 million a year or whatever it is that we're spending on this building? I don't think so. And especially when it was corrupted within 2 months of its original cause. So it's really time for the art of men acting. When you're an actor on stage, mostly what you have to learn how to do is to think and make choices. The greatest plays are all about people who made choices, and they either made the choices that worked or they made the choices that failed. Either it's a comedy or it's a tragedy in the way they went about it. Life is no different. Life is no different. When you're trying to go to work to fill this society with the nonsense it needs, but your kids are in school only learning how to continue the foolish method of keeping people in the luxuries that they want, but never really getting a true education, never really truly learning how to think. And then everybody says teachers need more money. Believe me, time to think, time to go up to those parent nights and sit and open up your mouth, get to the microphone, talk, go and check on what's going on. Anyhow, The Art of Men Acting, I will do everything I can to put some things in the link below as to how you buy the books from Amazon.com. My 3 books are there. They're in hardback or Kindle. I don't care if you read them or not. I really don't. But I do care that if you do read them, you contact me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll try to put in the link my website, my email, methods of getting to Facebook. I really don't know how to do any of that right now, but I will do everything I can in the link. I made a little brochure. I hope I can help you see it here. Maybe, I don't know if you can read as to some of the detail that is there. I'm not doing a good job. Anyhow, it's Brooklyn Odyssey. Tonight I won't be acting, not for profit. Thank you so much for being with me, and maybe this will open up a way for us to talk to each other, whether you read the books or not, but not just for you and me, but the world. The world. If out of the 98%, we lift 10% of that part of the world to activate them into their feelings and their thoughts, I promise you we will affect a major change in this world. Thank you. It was great talking to you.